A machine is making decisions. Diplomacy that took months now takes milliseconds. Diplomacy used to be about conversation. Now, diplomacy is a matter of calculation. The traditional handshake still happens today. But the outcome was predicted long before the meeting ever began. Companies now know more than governments. And they sell that knowledge to heads of state. Before the president even lands on foreign soil, the algorithm already knows who will bend. Protests don't start in streets. They start deep inside complex algorithms. The new diplomats hold no titles. They hold access to prediction engines. The first test was not a conventional war. It was an election that changed everything. The first strike isn't a missile. It is a line of code. It's a line of code. The machine now guards the high-stakes nuclear button. Before a human picks up the phone, the crisis was predicted months before the world ever saw it. But prediction alone did not save any lives. Critical infrastructure collapsed in just minutes. The attack on the power grid was immediate and absolute. The speed of the attack was beyond anything we had ever seen. No diplomat saw it coming. Cut the cables and the world goes silent. And the world goes silent. And the world goes silent. The war predicted as unlikely has now officially begun. Leaders find themselves in a state of controlled panic. The conflict has officially begun. Diplomats are now racing against an invisible clock. In the end, the algorithm failed. And reality moved faster than data. Markets across the globe crashed in just seconds. The machines moved first, and the humans could only watch, because the algorithm moved first. Investors watched in silence as the models predicted a complete collapse. Governments tried to regulate it. Contracts were signed in the shadows, far from public scrutiny. The news could not break fast enough to keep up with the data. Washington remained lit, but the power had already shifted. The old world is still here. The hallways of power were empty, but the servers were humming. A global order that felt solid was actually incredibly fragile. The weight of the decision was visible in every calculation. Every screen told the same story of a world in transition. As the sun rose, the world woke up to a new reality. The world is still turning, but the people turning it have changed. Not elected, not visible, only computable. The future is no longer a conversation, it is a probability curve. Every branch of intelligence is now unified by a single algorithm. The machine has finally learned how to govern the world. Somewhere in the dark, a machine is making decisions. Decisions that once took months of diplomacy now take milliseconds. The world's most powerful governments are no longer negotiating, and right now they are calculating. For centuries, diplomacy was the art of conversation, of long patience, of reading the nuances of a room. Now that room is a dashboard, and the conversation is an algorithm. In public, the traditional handshake still happens. But before it does, the outcome has already been predicted. Modeled, ranked, approved by a system no one voted for. Welcome to the age of algorithmic diplomacy. There are companies today that know more about a foreign government than its own citizens do. They sell that knowledge to the highest bidder. And their clients are not corporations. They are heads of state. Before any president lands, the algorithm has already mapped the terrain. Who is loyal, who is volatile, who will bend. The diplomat carries a briefcase. The algorithm carries a verdict. The technology wasn't built for politics. It was built to sell you sneakers. But somewhere along the way, the same machine that predicts your next purchase started predicting the next coup. Inside every summit, behind every closed door, there is a second meeting. A meeting between data sets. On one side, they bring the weight of tradition. The other brings a prediction engine. China understood first. They recognized the power of the data layer. That data is not a byproduct of diplomacy. In this new age, data is diplomacy. And they started collecting it before anyone else knew the game had changed. Whoever controls the cables controls the conversation. Whoever controls the conversation controls the narrative. And the narrative is now geopolitical currency. More valuable than oil, more dangerous than weapons. The intelligence community saw it coming. Buried in decades of signals data was a pattern that suggested traditional diplomacy had a fatal flaw. Traditional diplomacy was simply too slow. Diplomacy has always run on information, but for most of history, that information arrived weeks late. Decisions made on rumors, on impressions, on gut instinct. The algorithm has no gut, it has certainty. The first test wasn't a missile launch. It was an election that changed everything. And the people who ran the test discovered something terrifying. You don't need to fire a shot to change a government. A protest doesn't start in the streets. It starts in a feed algorithm, in a recommendation engine that knows you are angry before you do. And sometimes someone is feeding that engine on purpose. The most powerful diplomats in the world today don't hold government titles. They hold the API keys to global power, access to prediction engines that governments pay billions to license. This is the new diplomatic class. The report on your desk is already outdated. By the time the ink dries, the model has run 12 new simulations. Diplomacy used to be reactive. Now it is predictive, and that changes everything. Somewhere in a startup in Palo Alto, a team of 22-year-olds is deciding which governments are stable, predicting which economies will collapse, which elections can be influenced, and they have a government contract to do it. The speech is still delivered in person, but the response was written by a machine 3 days ago. Every word pressure tested against a predictive model of alliance behavior. Language, weaponized through data. Russia did not invent information warfare, but Russia perfected it. They understood the vulnerabilities. By understanding that a nation's greatest vulnerability is not its borders, it is its belief system. The troll farm is not propaganda. It is a targeting algorithm with a human interface. Feed it a population's fears, and it will manufacture the narrative at scale, in real time. Congress tried to regulate it. 3 hearings, 7 reports, 0 consequences. Because the technology moves at the speed of data, and legislation moves at the speed of bureaucracy. The think tanks wrote the warnings. The journals published the warnings. The governments read the warnings and then awarded the contracts anyway, because the algorithm already predicted they would. When the model predicts a conflict, the question is no longer if. The question is what happens next. Do you intervene before the event? Or do you let the prediction become a self-fulfilling prophecy? The algorithm predicted COVID-19 spread patterns 3 weeks before official acknowledgement, and yet no one acted. Because prediction without political will is just data. And data alone has never stopped a disaster. Economics and diplomacy have always been linked. But now a single algorithmic risk score can redirect billions in trade before a single official statement is made. The market knows before the minister does. In the Gulf, sovereign wealth funds are integrating predictive analytics into foreign investment strategy. The decision to back a government is no longer political. The entire process is now purely computational. The algorithm decides who gets the money. In the South China Sea, every move is predicted before it happens. American AI models track Chinese naval positioning. Chinese AI models track the American response. 2 algorithms watching each other in an endless diplomatic standoff. Nuclear diplomacy used to require decades of trust building. Now predictive models assess launch probability within seconds of a detected anomaly. The algorithm is now the first line of nuclear deterrence. Before a human picks up the phone, the machine has already responded. Cyber warfare has made traditional borders irrelevant. An attack on your infrastructure begins in another nation's server farm at 3 a.m., and the algorithm detects it, attributes it, and recommends a response before your diplomat wakes up. This is diplomacy at machine speed. The summit communique is published, but the real negotiation happened in the data layer. Weeks of machine modeling that determined what each leader could publicly agree to. The handshake is theater. The algorithm is the script. The humanitarian crisis was predicted 4 months before it began. The model flagged food insecurity, governance collapse, and climate pressure points. 47 governments received the report. 11 nations responded in time to the crisis. The conflict the world calls unexpected was predicted with 94% accuracy 6 weeks earlier. But accuracy without authority is useless. No algorithm can force a diplomat to act. And that gap between prediction and action is where people die. Not every government welcomes the algorithm. Some are beginning to question whose data is training the model, whose values are baked into the prediction, and who profits when the forecast becomes policy. Europe tried to build a fence around the algorithm. The AI Act, the Digital Services Act, guardrails written in the language of ethics. But ethics is not a server, and the data doesn't stop at a border. Inside every foreign ministry, there is now a tension. By understanding that a nation's greatest vulnerability is not its borders, it is its belief system. Between human judgment and algorithmic certainty, this is the fault line of modern power. The world is still turning, but the people turning it have changed. Not elected, not accountable, not visible. The future is now only computable. These are the new embassies of the digital age. No flags, no diplomatic immunity granted here, just algorithms and billion-dollar contracts with the world's most powerful governments. The architecture of modern influence revealed. Palantir was founded to find terrorists in the shadows, but its platform evolved into something broader than envisioned. A tool to model governments, populations, alliances, and vulnerabilities. It is now deployed by at least 45 national governments. They don't call it regime change in these circles. They call it scenario modeling with a clinical detachment. But when you model a government's collapse with enough precision, the model becomes a plan for action. In 2018, a North African election was decided by algorithmic micro-targeting. Not by the candidates who were on the stage. Not by the voters who were just data points. By a predictive platform that identified the 200,000 swing voters and reached every one of them. A revolution looks spontaneous to the naked eye, but it is rarely unplanned in the digital realm. Somewhere, someone pressed a button in a dark room, and a predictive model told them exactly when the conditions were ripe. The science of persuasion is centuries old, but redefined. But Cambridge gave it a dashboard of immense power. By combining personality psychology with big data, they built a targeting engine that knew you better than your family did, and sold that knowledge to the highest political bidder. Facebook handed the world's governments a mirror to watch, then a megaphone, then a targeting rifle for influence. The platform was never politically neutral as it claimed. It was always the most powerful geopolitical tool ever built, disguised as social media. TikTok is not an entertainment platform, but a tool. It is a behavioral modification system, so with 1.7 billion users. The question was never whether it could be weaponized. The question was whether it already had been used. The CIA uses predictive models to assess the mental state of foreign leaders. Stress indicators, communication pattern changes, behavioral anomalies detected. When a dictator is losing sleep, the algorithm detects it. And so does Langley, watching from the trees. When quantum computing scales, every encryption protecting every diplomatic communication falls. Every classified cable, every back-channel message in history. The algorithm will read history in real time and rewrite the rules of intelligence collection forever. The smart city was sold as efficiency, but underneath it runs a political compliance machine. Every face scanned, every gathering logged. Dissent identified algorithmically before it becomes visible. Huawei didn't sell hardware, it sold something else. It sold access to the heart of the network, to the data flowing through every call, every transaction, every government communication in 170 countries. The algorithm doesn't need a spy, it needs a router. India runs the largest democratic election in the world, and it is also the largest laboratory for algorithmic political influence. 1 billion voters, 1,000 data brokers, and a platform ecosystem that makes Cambridge Analytica look amateur. Pegasus was sold as a counterterrorism tool. It was used on journalists, activists, foreign heads of state. The algorithm doesn't distinguish between a terrorist and an inconvenient diplomat. Only its operator does. This is the key difference. When governments outsource intelligence to private firms, accountability disappears. The former CIA officer doesn't follow the Geneva Convention, and his contract is to an algorithm, not a constitution. And his contract is to an algorithm, not a constitution. Predictive policing was exported as foreign aid. But in countries with weak institutions, the algorithm becomes a tool of political targeting. Not criminals, not threats, just inconvenient communities being targeted by code. Financial sanctions are now algorithmic. The moment a designation is entered, the global banking system responds automatically. Before a press release, before a phone call, before a diplomat speaks, money, frozen by code. The algorithm reached into places no diplomat ever visited. Into favelas, into rural communities, into every corner of a continent. It didn't need a translator. It spoke every language simultaneously. On the Korean peninsula, two algorithms face each other across the most fortified border in the world. North Korea's behavior is now almost entirely modeled. Every missile test predicted within a 2-week window. The algorithm knows before the satellite does. The Geneva Conventions were written for humans, but when an algorithm decides who is a legitimate target, who is truly responsible in the end? The coder, the commander, the country that bought the model? In 2021, the first fully autonomous drone strike, guided entirely by algorithm, was attributed to the conflict in Libya. No human in the loop for this decision. The machine selected, tracked, and eliminated. Your history, your associations, your behavioral patterns, predicted. Taiwan manufactures 90% of the world's most advanced chips. Every algorithm that runs anywhere depends on this island. The geopolitical model knows this, which is why every great power is running simulations around it, constantly. Climate change has created new diplomatic theaters. In the Arctic, algorithms predict when new shipping lanes become viable. Sovereignty reclaimed through code. And which nations will move first before they know it themselves. Inside the technology community, an alarm is sounding that the systems being sold to governments were never designed to make decisions about human lives. That the values encoded in the algorithm reflect the values of its creators, and its creators were never elected. Every international traveler is now algorithmically assessed. Before you land, your risk profile has already been transmitted. Your history, your associations, your behavioral patterns, predicted. You are a data point in someone else's geopolitical model. The diplomat's office is now a cyber target. Their calendar, their communications, their strategies, all harvested by adversarial algorithms before the meeting even starts. Intelligence collection has become a machine war. Africa is writing its own algorithmic future. refusing to let foreign platforms define its political reality, demanding that data collected on African citizens stays on African servers, sovereignty reclaimed through code. The Foreign Service is adapting. Slowly and very reluctantly, they adapt to the change. They are teaching diplomats to read models, not just documents, to understand a regression output alongside a cultural briefing. Russia does not separate military intelligence from diplomatic strategy. For them, the algorithm is the weapon, the diplomat, and the press secretary, all in one. Integrated, coordinated, deniable, a complete geopolitical operating system. On election night, a second election takes place. Between algorithms and the people who write them, between foreign intelligence systems competing to influence what you believe, the voters choose, but someone else chose what they were shown. NATO is no longer just a military alliance. It is a data alliance. Member states now share algorithmic threat assessments alongside troop positions. The frontier of collective defense is written in code. Small nations are now the chess pieces in algorithmic great power competition. They don't know the model exists. They don't know their decisions are predicted. They just know the pressure never stops. The crisis the algorithm predicted has now begun. The diplomats are moving across the world stage, but the model already knows how this ends. It has run this scenario 11,000 times. When the conflict ends, the algorithm governs recovery. Which communities are rebuilt first in the reconstruction? Which populations are deemed stable enough to invest in? Humanitarian decisions are made entirely by machine. The architects of the old world are still in the room. But the room has changed. The walls are server racks now, and the decisions are already made. The battlefield has moved to orbit. Intelligence satellites now feed live data to predictive models running below. Every troop movement, every naval deployment. Seen, processed, predicted before it happens. 2 armies, 2 algorithms, and a border between them. Both sides running models that predict the other's next move. Both sides confident in their data. Both sides wrong about what happens next. The war the algorithm said was unlikely has begun. The models are being recalibrated. The diplomats are on the phone. But when tanks move, words become very slow. The algorithmic systems have completely failed. Not because the data was wrong, because the data was interpreted by people who didn't want to believe it. Prediction without action is just prophecy. The first strike was not a missile. It was a line of code. Critical infrastructure collapsed in 11 minutes. This was a systematic failure. No treaty covers this. No diplomat anticipated it. The Belt and Road Initiative was infrastructure, and every diplomat reverts to the oldest form of communication, a human in a room trying to understand another human. The technology had forgotten to protect its own foundation. When markets are run by algorithms, geopolitical shocks become financial weapons. The crisis in one country cascades algorithmically into every economy. Human diplomats cannot negotiate with trading bots. The market does not respect sovereignty. A deepfake of a president declared war. It was live for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. In that time, 3 nations mobilized. The algorithm created a crisis that took 3 weeks of human diplomacy to unwind. The model predicted a slow decline. What arrived was a collapse in 72 hours. The algorithm missed the human variable, the moment when a population decides, enough. When multiple powers fight a proxy war, they each bring their algorithm. Foreign powers running competing models in someone else's collapse. Each one trained on different data, different values, different definitions of the enemy. The war between algorithms kills real people. The algorithm predicted the veto. It was expected. It also predicted what the veto would cost in human lives. The math was clear. The politics were not. Mathematical prediction alone cannot replace the necessary political will. The rules of military engagement are now partially algorithmic. Engagement thresholds triggered by data, rapid response required. The process of conflict escalation is managed by complex predictive models, but the machine has never been to war, and war has never followed the model. In authoritarian states, the algorithm is the perfect enforcer. It never sleeps. It never negotiates. It flags dissent before it becomes action. And governments that once needed armies now need only data. Who is accountable when the algorithm makes the wrong call? The developer, the government that bought it? The officer who trusted it? There is no case law for algorithmic war crimes. The legal system was built for humans. Climate change is now the world's most accurate long-range predictive variable. The algorithm knows where the next conflict will happen because it knows where the next drought will happen. The battery in your phone was extracted by a child in harsh conditions. Diplomacy has no climate clause. The world tried to agree on rules for algorithmic diplomacy. The summit lasted 2 days. The fracture lasted years, the world watching the collapse of the order, because the nations that needed oversight were the ones who had the most to lose from it. The Belt and Road Initiative was infrastructure, but the data was power. But the data running through it was intelligence. Every payment, every call, every transaction flowing through Chinese-built systems. Physical colonialism was obvious, digital colonialism is invisible. India is building the third way. Not American surveillance capitalism, not Chinese state control. A democratic data infrastructure that answers to no single power. The world's largest democracy, becoming the world's largest data state. Africa is not waiting to be included in someone else's algorithm. A generation of engineers is building indigenous predictive systems. Systems that understand African contexts, because they were built by Africans. The geopolitical algorithm hike is finally going local. In failed states, the algorithm fills the governance vacuum. Foreign powers running competing models in someone else's collapse. Each predicting a different winner, each prolonging the war to prove their model right. The minerals that power the algorithms come from places those algorithms exploit. The battery in your phone was extracted by a child, and the algorithm that governed that extraction decided it was an acceptable trade-off. Prediction without empathy leads to systemic exploitation. Europe decided the algorithm needed a constitution. The AI Act became the world's most comprehensive algorithmic governance framework. But the companies that needed to comply had already moved their servers. Regulation has a jurisdiction. The algorithm does not. The problem is not too little data. The problem is too much certainty. The diplomats are on the phone. But when tanks move, words become very slow. Prediction without action is just prophecy. The first strike was not a missile. It was a line of code. No treaty covers this. No diplomat anticipated it. The math was clear, the politics were not. Mathematical prediction alone cannot replace political will. Escalation managed by predictive models. In authoritarian states, the algorithm is the perfect enforcer. It never sleeps. It never negotiates. Regulation has a jurisdiction. The algorithm does not respect boundaries. The problem is not too little data. The problem is understanding. The problem is too much certainty. In a world of variables, 5 models, 5 different predictions, 5 confident probability scores, and 1 exhausted human who has to decide the future. Some governments are now practicing diplomacy without the algorithm. Analog fallback. Deliberately removing the model to remember how to think without it. Because if the systems go down, the diplomats must still function. And they are discovering they have forgotten how to work alone. The algorithm knows too much and understands too little. It can predict the next war, but it cannot prevent the next mistake. Every payment, every call, every transaction, like flowing through the system. The algorithm predicted the genocide with dangerous precision. The Security Council was notified, but it was paralyzed by the data. In a quiet rural village, people go about their lives unaware. A wall or border cutting through fields and forests. Historic weight. The prediction was overruled, a choice between math and human experience. The diplomat was right. The algorithm had never been to the region. The team asks what the algorithm missed and why. History is made in silence. Information as commodity. Sovereignty for sale in the digital market. Built a model around you. Every transaction mapped and sold. The invisible market for political intelligence. Your data was not stolen. Efficiency had become vulnerability. Dependence on one single model. The internet was supposed to connect the world. It is now splitting it. 43 minutes of algorithmic failure. The fragility of dependence. Hospitals, borders, defense systems, all dependent on the algorithm. Practicing diplomacy without the algorithm, remembering how to think alone. 2 digital spheres, 2 sets of algorithms, 2 versions of reality. History is separating. Diplomats who cannot agree on facts. Cannot negotiate peace. The distance between us is growing. The technology had forgotten its foundation. The walls are invisible. The swarm has no commanding officer, no one to hold accountable. The swarm assumes nothing, it just executes. The goal is reached. The Geneva Convention assumes a human gave the order. The machine actors, the clock is running. Communities unaware, the math remains. Absolute silence and scale. Earth as a single data point. Every crisis, every conflict, every prediction visible at once. The algorithm knows too much and understands too little. The human is the final variable, reaching for the truth. After decades of algorithmic diplomacy without rules, the world finally convened. Coordinated, human-led efforts are rising. Not to celebrate technology, not to surrender to it, but to decide who the algorithm serves and who holds it accountable. For the first time, a classified failure was declassified, an algorithmic recommendation that started a crisis, a prediction that was wrong, a decision that was automatic, and the cost counted in lives. The new diplomat is not a tech expert, but they speak the language of the machine. They know its limitations better than its creators, because they have to govern what the algorithm cannot. The breakthrough happened when they turned off the screens, when neither side had a probability score telling them the negotiation would fail. When two people sat in a room and chose to listen, the algorithm had calculated the odds against peace. The diplomats ignored it. The algorithm said the risk was too high. The humanitarian said the need was higher. They went anyway, demonstrating immense human courage in the face of machine denial. And for 500 families, the algorithm was simply wrong. The next generation is being trained differently. Not to trust the algorithm blindly, not to reject it reflexively, but to understand it well enough to override it when necessary. Transparency became the new condition of access. Show us the training data, show us the assumptions, show us whose values are embedded in the prediction. Because a biased model is a biased foreign policy. The institution was imperfect from day one, but it existed, a tangible foundation for global cooperation, a place where the algorithm could be questioned, where a government could demand, explain your prediction. When the algorithm is used well, people live who would have died. When the model serves human judgment, instead of replacing it, it becomes what it always should have been, a tool, not a tyrant. The model showed them the options. The diplomats chose the one the model ranked lowest, because the model didn't account for dignity, and the negotiators knew dignity was the only thing that mattered. The people who had been modeled finally spoke back. They demanded the right to know when an algorithm had made a decision about their country, their government, their life. The algorithm had always known their data. Now, they wanted to know when the community owns the algorithm changes. It optimizes for their values, their priorities, not a contractor's profit margin, not a superpower's strategic interest, just the people who live here. The world managed to agree on one thing, that no machine should independently decide to take a human life. That somewhere in the chain, a human must say yes. It was the smallest possible step, but it was a step. The best diplomats are still the ones who can read a room, not a dashboard, who understand that silence in a negotiation means something different in Riyadh than in Seoul. The algorithm has not learned that yet. Humanity remains the ultimate diplomatic protocol. This is what it looks like when it works. When the algorithm is a servant, not a sovereign. When the diplomat holds the pen and the machine holds the data, and both know their role. The declaration was not perfect. It was not binding, it was not enforced. But it said something no one had said before at this scale, that the algorithm must justify itself to the people it governs. The model must now explain itself, in language that non-experts can challenge, in formats that legislatures can debate. The age of the black box is ending, because black boxes make decisions that require daylight. The algorithm said peace was 3% probable. The diplomat who didn't read the report said, "Let's try anyway." Sometimes, the most important diplomatic act is to ignore the data and trust the human. Human can overcome any model. In the end, it was the small nations that taught the algorithm its limits because they had the most to lose. In the end, it was the small nations that taught the algorithm its limits, winning on principle. Sovereignty demanded a data border, a hard-won triumph. The world's first embassy of data sovereignty opened in a city that preferred to remain unnamed. Its job was simple, to ensure that no algorithm anywhere in the world could define its citizens without their consent. Diplomacy finally arrived in the digital age. The best version of the future is not human versus algorithm. It is human with algorithm, where the machine predicts and the diplomat decides, where data informs and wisdom leads. This is the new architecture of power. The court had no precedent, only principle, that any algorithm deployed in a diplomatic context must answer to human law. That prediction is not permission, and computation is not justice. At this border, the algorithm recommends, and a human decides every single time, not because the machine is wrong, but because the human is responsible, and responsibility cannot be computed. The model had been trained on centuries of conflict. It had no data for what happens when someone chooses differently. The algorithm does not model hope. That remains entirely human. Climate became the issue where the algorithm finally proved its worth. Not as a political weapon, not as an influence tool, but as a mirror. showing the world what would happen if nothing changed, and what could happen if everything did. The generation that will govern the world grew up with the algorithm. They are not afraid of it. They are not in awe of it. They treat it the way every generation should treat its most powerful tool, with skill and suspicion. Trust in the algorithmic age means showing your model, your training data, your assumptions, your biases. The most radical diplomatic act of the era was two adversaries opening their algorithms to each other. Transparency is disarmament. The algorithm that mapped their territory for extraction was turned by them into a protection tool. The same code, the same data. But in the hands of the community it once threatened, it became a shield. The most important improvement to the algorithm was the simplest. And diplomats finally found a model they could trust. To output uncertainty instead of false confidence. Diplomacy in its appropriate lane. Because it was honest about its limits. The principles were not complicated. The algorithm serves the diplomat. The diplomat serves the people. And the people retain the right to override both. 3 sentences, a century in the making. Power has always belonged to those who had more information. Information made visible. The algorithm changed who has information, but not who is responsible for what they do with it. That responsibility has always been and will always be human. Computation is not justice, it is chosen, every single day. Final result. The survivors demanded one thing, that the systems which failed them be named, that the algorithms that missed the signals be examined, that the companies that sold the models accept what their models cost. Accountability is not optional, even for code. The institutions of the world did not collapse under the weight of the algorithm. They bent, they cracked, they were reshaped, and in the reshaping, something older survived. The belief that power must answer to people, even when power is written in code. The algorithm told her the decision was wrong. It had run the numbers 40,000 times. She closed the screen, looked at the cities, and chose anyway. Not because she was certain, because she was responsible. Judgment is the ultimate human frontier. The algorithm of power is not going away. It is becoming more accurate, more influential, embedded in every decision that shapes your world. The only question that remains is who holds the human in the loop. And whether that human remembers what they are there for, the answer to that question is not computed. It is chosen every single day.